Thank you. My name is Rob Kurzban, and today I would like to share a question that I've had that maybe you yourselves have also had, which is, why is it that everyone else seems to be such a hypocrite? And my interest in this question is actually really not in the question itself, but because it raises another question, which is really important. David Eagleman alluded to this in his remarks. And the question is about the human mind, which is that how is it that we're so smart, given that we're made of bits that aren't? We're made of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and proteins and so forth, none of which themselves are smart. They don't do anything particularly smart. So how is it that you get all these bits of chemicals and proteins together to do something so incredible as what the human mind does, including all the things that we taste and smell and all the social relationships we have and all the emotions that you've heard about today? And the first thing I want to do is talk to you about one way in which this can't possibly work, a bad answer to this question, which is this idea that somehow there's a little smart part of you, and then there's some dumb bits, and the smart part sort of does all the heavy lifting, all the hard work, something like a self or something like that, that's kind of watching the show. Because the problem with explanations like this is that now you have to explain how the smart thing works. And so you have an infinite regress problem that can only be solved really with a very different kind of answer. And I think the best place to look for this kind of answer is in something that almost all of you probably have right now, which is one of these, a smartphone. And if you ask yourself, why do we call smartphones smart? The answer is not because they're really good at making phone calls. They don't make phone calls any better than the phones that we had in our houses 10, 15, 30, 50 years ago. What makes them smart is that they have, as part of them, specialized little applications. So you have something for keeping track of the time, something for sending text messages, something for launching angry birds into houses that mysteriously have green pigs living inside them with helmets on for safety, I guess. And what makes a smartphone smart is that it bundles together all of these useful little bits with narrow jobs to do. You put them all together and you get a smartphone. And what I want to suggest to you today is that this is a really good way to think about the human mind as well, that what makes human minds smart is that we also bundle together lots of specialized applications, although as biologists, we don't refer to them as applications, we call them adaptations or mechanisms. These include lots and lots of different things. For example, you've got the senses in there, the visual system. Inside there, you've also got mechanisms for telling you which kinds of foods to eat. You've got systems designed for learning language and producing language. You've got systems that are designed for lots of social activities, like understanding what other people think. Then you have mechanisms designed for figuring out what other people think and then manipulating them based on what you think they think. You've got mechanisms in your head to detect other people's inconsistencies. You've got little systems in there whose job it is to cause you to deliver benefits to those who are related to you. These are kin-selected mechanisms. You have systems in your head that cause you to build alliances, friendships, belong to groups. You have systems which I think David Buss will tell you about after I'm done here for selecting mates. You've got systems to cause you to not do things like avoiding inbreeding. No picture for that one. You've got systems for identifying people who have cheated. You've got systems for doing one of my favorite activities, which is saying what somebody else has done is bad, 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 moral judgment systems. And then a really important system in there is the last one, which is a public relations system, which you can think of as the part of your brain that talks, that delivers all of the things that you say, including all of the psychological propaganda that we put out into the world. This is a big one, so it gets a little glue thing going on. Okay. So what I want to say is that once you have this idea that the mind consists of different parts, it's very easy to understand that different parts of the mind can contradict one another. Let's go back to some optical illusions. You saw some of these yesterday. Take a look at square A and B. You'll see that they appear to be very different shades. What I'm going to do is take those two squares off on the side and bring them into the center square. I'm not changing the shade as they move, but now you'll see that, in fact, those are the same shade. So you have a belief in your head that those two things are the same shade, and yet your perceptual application, your little visual system, has a belief that they're different shades. And so in the same head, you can have two different beliefs that are in conflict about the very same thing. And this is because the mind consists of all these different parts. This has deep implications for psychology. In particular, one of the things that this tells us is that there can be all this stuff going on in your brain. That's all the things on the left side of these pictures. And then there's sort of the stuff you know about. When I say you, I mean the experiencing you. And those two things can be very different. So that is to say, there might be all kinds of stuff going on in your head telling you how to behave, what to think, and so on, that you're completely unaware of. In fact, most of the stuff we're unaware of. You're not aware of the systems which are designed to keep track of your breathing, which are moving your muscles around. All that stuff sort of takes place in the background. So how does this intersect with this idea about hypocrisy that I began with? Well, it should be clear that if you have inconsistencies all the way down at the level of vision, you can get inconsistencies in the rest of the application system. So here we have, just to take a random example, we have the moralistic judgment system. So this is a person who is in their public relations system broadcasting to the world, you know what, drugs are bad, bad, bad. We should ban them. We should make sure people who do them, buy them, and sell them are punished. Right? Just like Steve Levitt said that we should punish people who buy and sell organs, we should also punish people who buy and sell this particular plant that has interesting psychochemical effects. So I hear. So we have a really elaborate system for saying what is bad, 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 and this is the moralistic judgment system. But what's really important is that you have a whole set of other systems in your head which are guiding your behavior. Right? So we all like to do lots of different things, even if we have previously announced to the world that we think those things are bad, 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 and that people should be punished for doing them. So even in the same head, it's very easy to have an individual who, at one point, broadcasts to the world that doing drugs are bad, and then once they are perhaps unobserved or think they're unobserved, choose to engage in a very different sort of behavior that's wildly inconsistent with this. Of course, these inconsistencies can be more subtle. For example, you might think that someone who is voicing their moralistic judgments is saying, people shouldn't do X, Y, or Z because it's dangerous. And then if you ask them whether the thing that they do is dangerous, if that should be banned, they might say, oh, no, that's different. Right? And so you get these inconsistencies in moral positions that have a lot to do with us going around the world using our moral judgment systems to impose coercion, to stop other people from doing certain things, while our behavioral systems are causing us to do exactly those sorts of things to achieve the kinds of goals that we have. This is not, of course, something which is necessarily unfamiliar. We see this in our political discourse, but it's easy to see this on the road. So I don't know if you can see exactly, but here we have a bumper sticker, which is one person's way of sort of broadcasting to the world, this is something that I think is bad, bad, bad. No one should do this thing. And then you could see the person is doing that very thing. And so hypocrisy is ubiquitous. I think that we tend to think that politicians are more hypocritical than the rest of us, and maybe that's true. I don't mean to excuse them, but I just want to ask you to bear in mind that politicians are in the funny position of having to say what they think is right and what they think is wrong, and also their behavior is scrutinized. I invite you to consider what would happen if someone followed you around for a day, a week, a year, recording all the things that you morally condemned with your moralistic judgment system, recorded everything that you did with your behavioral system, and just think about how consistent or inconsistent those things might be. My point, of course, is that hypocrisy is ubiquitous, and I think that's because of the very nature of the human mind, that it consists of all these different parts put together. That is to say, the answer to the sort of easy question, why is everyone else a hypocrite, is part and parcel of the answer to the harder question, which is, how does the mind get so smart? And both of those have to do with the fact that you have the composition of all these different systems. And I don't at all mean to suggest that the picture I showed you exhausts all the different things that humans do. There's the emotional systems, there's memory systems about which we've heard during the course of this workshop. So the last question then is, why is it that you tend to think that everyone else is a hypocrite, but we exempt ourselves from this? And the relatively short answer has to do with the fact that as soon as you notice some inconsistency in your own behavior, you run the risk that other people are going to notice it too. And so the best way to avoid being identified as someone whose behavior is inconsistent is not to notice it yourself, lest that truth leak out as you interact with the people in the world around you. And this creates this really funny asymmetry, whereas we're very quick to spot these inconsistencies in others, and yet we're designed not to spot them at all when they occur in ourselves. And this really is why you think that everyone else is a hypocrite. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention today. Appreciate it.